Joining us now, David Ignatius, Washington Post foreign affairs columnist, and Ambassador Michael Carpenter, former National Security Council Senior Director for Europe. All right, Michael, I want to begin with you. How do you go to Saudi Arabia and hold peace talks when one of the countries involved in the war, the one that was the aggressor, is not there? Is the United States acting as Russia here? Are we proposing Russia's ideas for peace to the Ukrainians?
What I think this administration is trying to do, Katie, is to position itself between Ukraine and Russia, which is not where the United States has been over the course of these last 3 years of this brutal war against Ukraine. We have been siding with Ukraine and trying to represent Ukraine's interests to the best of our abilities. Now there's an equidistant position, which you saw in that famous Oval Office meeting in terms of some of the remarks from President Trump. And what it appears the United States is trying to do here is put pressure on Ukraine to come to the table to do a deal with Russia in the absence of any security guarantees for that deal to be secure over the longer term. What Ukraine wants is European powers on the ground so that if Russia reneges at some point in the future, there will be forces there to enforce some sort of peace. But it appears this administration wants to do a deal in the absence of that kind of a security guarantee, just to get something on paper that will lead to a ceasefire in the immediate term. That's not what Ukraine wants.
David, how does that help the United States, though? So if there's a peace deal that doesn't actually cement peace and, say, Russia reinvades or does something aggressive again, doesn't that just blow up in Donald Trump's face?
That's the argument precisely that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and other Europeans have been making to the Trump administration. If you make a deal without security guarantees, this war is going to return while Donald Trump is president. It will, just as you said, blow up in his face. So they're saying Trump, as much as anyone has an interest in a stable and sustainable peace, I think Michael put his finger on the key issue of security guarantees. I think that's still something that's being hammered out in these meetings in Saudi Arabia. The Ukrainians are looking for a formula that the United States might accept. Most of the responsibility here is on Europe. The issue that's going to arise beyond these talks, and we'll have to see what the readout is from Rubio and Secretary of State Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz later today. But the real issue now is what Putin is willing to do on his part to make negotiations work. Putin has been strident in rejecting the Ukrainian proposals, and he seems to have the same ambitions he had before the war began, before the Ukrainians had fought so valiantly to prevent Russia from seizing Kyiv and taking over Ukraine. So the really tough part, I think, follows the meetings in Saudi Arabia. I'd be surprised if the Ukrainians didn't provide enough that the Trump administration will say, okay, we now are ready to go to the table. But that's where the real battle is going to begin.
Yeah, explain that to me, Ambassador. How does the United States walk out of this meeting and then get Russia on board with it? I mean, this is a one-sided negotiation. They're going to have to get the other side, the aggressor, to say yes to this. What's that going to look like?
Yeah, no, that's the million-dollar question. I think the sides will walk away from the table in Saudi Arabia with some sort of a critical minerals agreement that purports to provide security guarantees. But remember that U.S. companies were in Ukraine when the full-scale invasion began in February of 2022. So it's hard to see how U.S. mining interests would somehow deter Russia from reinvading Ukraine in the future. The bottom line here is that there is no overlapping Venn diagram between Ukraine's interests and Russia's interests. And all the pressure that the U.S. is bringing to bear right now is on Ukraine, not on Russia. As David just said, Putin has been very clear. What he wants is 5 Ukrainian oblasts or regions to be ceded to Russia in their entirety. He wants a guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO and that there will be no NATO allied troops inside Ukraine. And furthermore, he's demanding that there be some sort of demilitarization of Ukraine over the long term, meaning a cap on the size of the Ukrainian armed forces. That to President Zelensky is capitulation. And so it's very hard to see how the United States, the Trump administration, can bring the two sides together and get a deal when there is absolutely no overlapping interest here in a ceasefire.
David, what exactly do we get out of this? Why is Donald Trump inserting himself so forcefully into this negotiation? If he just wants to save the money that we're sending to Ukraine, that's one thing. But is there something else that he sees the United States getting out of this that maybe I'm not seeing?
Yeah. So, Katie, I think we probably should take Trump at his word when he says that this war has been a horrific nightmare with the level of death and destruction that the world just finds unacceptable. This is a war that needs to come to an end. He said that repeatedly through the campaign, and I think he probably means it. In his transactional way, he wants to get something for America's role in ending the war. But I think this is a killing ground. Trump says it over and over again, and so I think that's really at the top of his agenda.